Okay, picture this. It's Mother's Day morning. A daughter pulls up to her parents' house. They hadn't shown up for a celebratory lunch, so she's just checking in, right? She walks through the front door, and immediately she is plunged into a literal nightmare. She scrambles to dial 911, and the words that just tumble out of her mouth to the dispatcher are absolutely chilling. She cries, "There's blood everywhere." She is nearly decapitated. It's a scene of unimaginable horror. We're talking about a completely savage attack with blood covering the doors, the walls, the ceilings. And this isn't happening in some dark alley somewhere. It's happening in an environment that makes it all the more shocking.
So, welcome to today's Explainer, the Rockville Mystery. We are going to unravel a deeply twisted, incredibly baffling Mother's Day double homicide. Now, what makes this story so uniquely terrifying is the setting. It's an upscale, sleepy little neighborhood in Rockville, Maryland, where people just feel inherently safe. You know the kind of place? This is a case that completely baffled investigators right from the jump. So let's dive in. We're going to walk through the evidence, the incredibly frustrating dead ends, and some twists that you honestly won't believe.
To really wrap our heads around this crime, we need to look at who we lost. Dick and Jody Valardo were just an incredibly beloved couple. Married for 40 years. They were absolute pillars of their community and super involved in local charities. Dick was just known as a great guy who had found a lot of financial success, and together they raised two wonderful kids and built this really beautiful life and home. I mean, they were literally the last people anyone would expect to be targeted in a violent crime. And that lack of known enemies, that's absolutely crucial here. Because when victims live in a pristine neighborhood with zero dark secrets, investigators are forced to start from absolute zero.
Okay, let's step into the shoes of the detectives for a second. When police arrived, they found a very specific path of destruction. The point of entry was pretty clear, a cut screen on the den window with a jimmied lock. But then, things start getting really strange. The attacker left a trail of bloody footprints, but they weren't shoe prints, and they weren't bare feet either. The impressions showed a really distinct crew sock pattern. So the attacker had actually taken off their shoes? Wild. As for motive, it looked like a robbery. Cash, jewelry, expensive Rolex watches were all gone. But the most baffling piece of evidence of a whole shebang? A bloody, gloved handprint left right on the refrigerator door. Like, did the killer stop to open the fridge? Did they already know the layout of the house?
Now, the sheer brutality of what happened inside that house is honestly hard to comprehend. The crime scene told a terrifying story of a sequenced attack characterized by absolute, unrestrained overkill. The attacker started right in the bedroom. Dick Valardo was ambushed as he lay sleeping, stabbed more than 40 times and left for dead. Jody, who was on the opposite side of the bed, actually managed to run. She fled out of the bedroom and made this desperate dash to the kitchen to grab the landline phone. Investigators found that phone dropped and broken on the floor, because it was right there in the kitchen that the attacker caught up to her using what police described as a serious knife that nearly decapitated her.
So the absolutely crucial question is this. Who on earth would want to kill Dick and Jody Valardo? I mean, the sheer savagery, the massive overkill we just talked about. That usually points to a crime of passion or some intense vengeance. It almost never points to just a simple robbery gone wrong. Think about it. Burglars typically want to get in, grab the goods, and get out unnoticed. They don't usually slaughter an elderly couple in their sleep with a massive knife. So the Rockville police are looking at a wide-open, super high-profile case with a terrifying thought lingering in the back of their minds. Was there a cold-blooded killer living right among them?
Detectives had to cast a really wide net, logically chasing down three distinct paths. Step 1. The Valardos had actually spent their final evening at a nearby casino. Police knew there had been a recent rash of follow-home robberies where casino winners were tracked right to their driveways, so huge theory right there. Step 2. Detectives found out the Valardos had recently testified in a federal case. Given the incredible overkill at the scene, revenge seemed highly plausible. Step 3. There were transient landscapers, locals called them woodchuckers, going door to door in the neighborhood asking to cut down trees. Honestly, any of these seemed like a really solid lead. But, one by one, after exhaustive police work, they all turned out to be complete dead ends.
Just as the trail is starting to go cold, investigators get a massive break, and it actually comes from one of their own. A retired police officer calls into the department with a tip to look at the literal boy next door, a young guy named Brian Thomas. Now, years earlier, as a juvenile, Brian had actually burglarized the Valardos' home and even took one of their cars on a joyride. Boom! Suddenly, investigators have a prime suspect staring them right in the face. He lives next door, he definitely knows the layout of the house, and he has a documented criminal history with these exact victims. But there's a catch. The Thomas family was supposed to be on a big vacation to Alaska. Police learned Brian had actually stayed behind, though. So they bring him in, grill him, and, well, He's cleared. He provided nothing substantial, his alibi totally held up. Brian was not their guy. But you know what? Detectives didn't just abandon the Thomas family connection entirely. Knowing that the Valardo home was robbed, they immediately shifted their focus to local pawn shops, hunting for those stolen Rolexes. Well, they didn't find the watches, but they got a massive hit anyway. Surveillance cameras captured someone pawning a class ring. Now actually, scratch that. It wasn't the Valardo's ring. It was a ring reported stolen a month earlier from Eve Dempier, the neighbor who lived directly across the street. And the person caught on camera pawning that stolen ring? It was Brian's younger brother, Scott Tomasewski. Wow. Now they have a known thief living right next door, definitively tied to recent neighborhood burglaries.
So this discovery obviously thrusts Scott Tomasewski straight to the very top of the suspect list. But investigators immediately run into a total logistical nightmare. Their new prime suspect, Scott, had what looked like an ironclad perfect alibi. He was currently 2,000 miles away, sailing in international waters on that family cruise to Alaska. He wasn't even on U.S. soil. So you have to wonder, how on earth could someone commit a brutal double homicide, clean up the crime scene, and then just casually hop on a flight for a family cruise just a few hours later?
To figure out if this was even physically possible, police meticulously mapped out the exact timeline of that Saturday night, and it reveals an incredibly tight window. The Valardos returned home from the casino sometime after 11 p.m. Based on all the forensic evidence, investigators pinpointed the approximate time of the brutal murders to 1:30 a.m. Scott and his family were scheduled to leave their home for the airport to start their vacation at exactly 3 a.m. Okay, do the math. That means Scott had a mere 90 minutes. 90 minutes to break in, commit an unspeakably violent double homicide, run home, ditch his bloody clothes, hide the weapons, pack his bags, and get into a car with his parents for a family vacation. It's almost unbelievable.
And get this, while he was actually on that cruise, Scott was highly engaged with the news of what was happening back home, sending these incredibly arrogant text messages to his brother. He texted, unlike 2,000 miles away and it's still scary, there's been a bunch of robberies and a double murder and all Cobb said before was it's landscapers. He even threw in some heavy expletives, calling the police lazy. Think about that. He's actively mocking the investigation from afar, totally confident that the authorities are chasing their tails looking at transient workers and have absolutely no idea it was just the boy next door.
But the police definitely weren't lazy. They were quietly setting a trap. To make sure Scott didn't just chuck crucial evidence over the side of the ship into the ocean, Montgomery County detectives actually partnered with the FBI, the local Juneau police, and the Coast Guard. And the Coast Guard literally halted this massive luxury cruise ship at sea in international waters until the authorities are in position. Then they execute this simultaneous bi-coastal strike. In Juneau, they storm the ship, arrest Scott, and hit the evidence lottery. They find blood-soaked cash in his wallet and a knife hidden right under his clothes. At that exact same moment, thousands of miles away, back in Rockville, police execute a search warrant at Scott's home. And right there in the washing machine, they find musty, stained dark clothes, a ski mask, and the exact gloves that perfectly match that bloody print on the Valardo's fridge.
And here is the detail that it's incredibly surreal. When heavily armed law enforcement officers stormed a luxury cruise ship in Alaska, slapped handcuffs on Scott Tomasewski, and dragged him away as the primary suspect in a brutal double homicide, his parents' reaction was literally nothing. They were completely unfazed by the whole thing. Scott's mom and dad simply stepped off the ship and went on their pre-planned sightseeing tour, just continuing their vacation while their son was hauled off to jail. It's a truly shocking glimpse into a deeply, deeply unusual family dynamic.
So, back in Maryland, Scott waives his right to an attorney and actually sits down with the detectives. He confesses to the stabbings, but he claims he didn't go in there to kill them. He says he just got startled and it all happened so fast. But honestly, the most chilling part of his confession explained that totally bizarre piece of evidence from earlier, the bloody glove print on the fridge. When detectives finally asked him about it, Scott just casually replied, "I may have grabbed a ginger ale out of there because my throat was really dry." Think about that. Moments after savagely murdering his lifelong neighbors, he stood in their kitchen, covered in their blood, and stopped for a refreshing soda. The absolute coldness and senselessness of that action is just staggering.
But there was still one major piece of the puzzle missing. Medical examiners knew for a fact that the small knife found in Alaska couldn't possibly have caused the massive, nearly decapitating injuries to Jody Valardo. They needed a larger weapon. Well, police dug up a text Scott had sent his ex-girlfriend just days before the murder, asking for a hockey mask and showing off a picture of a full-blown machete. They got a tip that Scott had hidden a backpack in a closet at his house, but when police went to look for it, it was gone. And why? Because Scott had help. His own mother, Jeanette, had taken the backpack, which contained Dick's stolen Rolexes and that machete, and literally thrown it in the trash to protect her son.
In the end, the evidence against Scott Tomasewski was just a mountain that couldn't be climbed. Because the physical evidence was so utterly overwhelming, he really had no choice but to plead guilty. There wouldn't even be a trial. Scott was officially charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder, armed robbery, and burglary, receiving 2 consecutive life sentences. As for his mother, she was initially facing serious charges of being an accessory after the fact for disposing of the murder weapon, but she ended up striking a plea deal to testify against her son if it went to trial, which allowed her to avoid charges entirely.
As we wrap up this explainer today, I really want to bring our focus back to where it truly belongs, on the victims. Because beyond the wild twists of cruise ship raids and hidden machetes, there is a profound human tragedy here. But there's also a profound story of love. At the sentencing, prosecutors revealed one final, absolutely heartbreaking detail about the crime scene. Dick Valardo, an elderly man who had just been violently ambushed in his sleep and stabbed more than 40 times, didn't just stay in that bed. In his final moments on Earth, bleeding and dying, he gathered whatever tiny bit of strength he had left, actually got out of bed, and tried to make his way through the house to save his wife of 40 years. It leaves us with such a lingering question, right? How can such profound, selfless love exist right next door to such absolute, senseless darkness? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and I encourage you to keep questioning the world around you.